In 1859, John Stuart Mill, in his book On Liberty, wrote what became known as the harm principle. You can do whatever you want as long as you don't harm somebody else. This is kind of, not completely, but kind of the viewpoint the others that I referred to last night had as well. And you'll hear a lot of people say that, so what if somebody's a prostitute? So what if they use drugs? So what if they overdose? It's unfortunate, but that's their freedom to do so. So what if the person does something that doesn't affect society? Now then you have a debate over, well, does it affect society? Does it affect another person? But I'm not going there right now. We're sticking with the word liberty. In my new book on power, I'm going into chapter 6, which is the last substantive chapter before the epilogue, the final paragraph or two of the book. And I'm tackling this issue of liberty. Now, I'm not going to go over everything I did last night. You can actually play that back if you'd like to. But you might recall, those of you who were here, that I was delving into On Liberty, a book written by John Stuart Mill, a very, very important book, I might add, in 1859, where he tried to tackle this issue of liberty. And for many libertarians, he's the man. And so I want to start there again. Last night we talked about Aristotle, Sam Adams. We talked about Jefferson and others. People who really, we would believe, tackled this word liberty and tackled it to the ground and defined it. But so far we've found that they weren't really able to define it. They were able to define what it's not, how to preserve it, the best way for a government to be set up to promote it, that it is a right that belongs to the people, but on the other hand, the people can't abuse it because otherwise they'll be interfering with the liberty of other people. Some really smart stuff, but still no definition. So as I left off last evening, in 1859, John Stuart Mill, in his book On Liberty, wrote what became known as the harm principle. You can do whatever you want as long as you don't harm somebody else. This is kind of, not completely, but kind of the viewpoint the others that I referred to last night had as well. And you'll hear a lot of people say that, so what if somebody's a prostitute? So what if they use drugs? So what if they overdose? It's unfortunate, but that's their freedom to do so. So what if the person does something that doesn't affect society? Now then you have a debate over, well, does it affect society? Does it affect another person? But I'm not going there right now. We're sticking with the word liberty. And what he says about this harm principle, John Stuart Mill, he wrote a whole book on it, which was actually a very long essay that they turned into a book. The object of this essay is to assert one very simple principle. As entitled to govern absolutely the dealings of society with the individual in the way of compulsion and control, whether the means used by physical force in the form of legal penalties or the moral coercion of public opinion, that principle is that the sole end for which mankind is warranted individually or collectively in interfering with the liberty of action of any of their number is self-protection. And he says in italics, as I pointed out last evening, that the only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others. Do whatever you want to yourself or with yourself, unless it harms others. Then it's not just about himself or herself. His own good, either physical or moral, is not a sufficient warrant. He cannot rightfully be compelled to do or forbear because it will better for him to do so, because it will make him happier, because in the opinion of others to do so would be wise or even right. And by the way, I agree with aspects of this, just not all of it. It's not the government's job to interfere with your life if they think something will make you happier. What is that all about? But still, I don't necessarily agree with this, do whatever you want, whenever you want, because that won't affect or do harm to anybody else. Let's go on. The only part of the conduct of anyone which he is amenable to society is that which concerns others. And the part which merely concerns himself, his independence, is of right absolute. No exceptions. Over himself, over his own body and mind, the individual is sovereign. So Mill was not the first to make this argument, but he was among the most prominent. Yet in the last chapter of On Liberty, Mill's book, he rationally explains, listen to this, the principles asserted in these pages must be more generally admitted as the basis for discussion of details, before a consistent application of them to all the various departments of government and morals can be attempted with any prospect of advantage. That's interesting, isn't it? He's saying, okay, I've written this entire book, comes to the end, and he says the principles asserted in these pages must be more generally admitted as the basis for discussion of details. In other words, I'm giving you the umbrella. You're going to have to figure out what goes under it. That requires more debate before a consistent application of them to all the various departments of government and morals can be attempted with any prospect of advantage. I offer not so much applications as specimens of application, which may serve to bring into greater clearness the meaning and limits of the two maxims which together form the entire doctrine of this essay, and to assist the judgment in holding the balance between them in the cases where it appears doubtful which of them is applicable to the case. Okay, so now in fairness to him, he wrote an entire essay on this, which turned into a book. I'm just referencing what is considered the heart and soul of it, the core of it, in those couple of paragraphs. But still, what is he saying? He's saying, hey, look, this is my theory of the matter. You got to really duke it out over the specifics and figure out the specifics to determine the application. And then he says he's got these maxims. Well, what are his two maxims? The maxims are first that the individual is not accountable to society for his actions, insofar as these concern the interests of no person but himself. Advice, instruction, persuasion, and avoidance by other people, if thought necessary by them for their own good, are the only measures by which society can justifiably express its dislike or disapprobation of his conduct. Secondly, and this is where it's important, that for such actions as are prejudicial to the interests of others, the individual is accountable and may be subjected either to social or to legal punishments if society is of the opinion that one or the other is requisite for its protection. Wow. What just happened there? That's a pretty broad statement, don't you think? Let me read this to you again. The second maxim. Secondly, that for such actions as are prejudicial to the interests of the others, the individual is accountable and may be subjected either to social or to legal punishments if society is of the opinion that one or the other is requisite for its protection. Now, as I write, this book is not intended to be a review of Mill or his book, but the importance of both in the liberty debate over the last century and a half is undeniable. Yet his great effort at defining liberty, which is truly extraordinary, seems to be largely undone by a single sentence, his second maxim, which acknowledges the need for law, but is ambiguous to the point of providing substantial negative power, authority to the government, and political latitude for government to determine the balance between liberty and authority. Again, let me explain what I'm saying here. He says, secondly, for such actions as are prejudicial to the interest of others, okay, the individual is accountable, fair enough, and may be subject either to social or to legal punishments if society is of the opinion that one or the other is requisite for its protection. Well, that seems like a lot of power for society, and conversely, a lot of power that's taken away from the individual. It seems like a lot of authority given to government, which is the manifestation of society. It seems so to me.
For all this and much more, sign up for Levin TV.